Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Simon Hodgkins, and I'm pleased to be joined by Denis Roche. Denis is a founder of eAltra, an innovator at the intersection, I suppose, of healthcare, AI, we're all hearing about AI at the moment, and patient experience. Now, Denis has a rich background. It spans everything from academia, clinical practice, and enterprise, of course. And Denis and the team at the company, they're really looking to redefine how we engage with patients through technology. Technology that's not just smart, but is actually compassionate. So we're going to hear all about that. But Denis, you're very welcome to Vista Talks. Thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Well, let's dive into it. We've got a lot to cover. And Denis, I started with your career. It bridges these clinical settings, this academic research, and now healthcare entrepreneurship, maybe, if I can phrase it that way. So can you take us a little bit through the journey, a bit about the context? Because obviously you then founded eAltra. So tell us a bit about that story, if you don't mind.
Began with my work that I was doing in a place called the London Clinic in Harley Street in London. It's the largest private hospital in London. And I was working to see how we could digitalize the patient experience, patient journeys. Could we bring digital in and make things better for patients using digital tools? So that was really where it began. I was working with the really great clinical nurse specialist there in the head and neck cancer department, and it was just sort of she was really involved with her patients. It's private healthcare, so she's super available to her patients, but yet the communication was kind of quite multimodal. It was coming down different channels. It could be like a phone call or a letter or text or email or whatever. And the thing that we set out to do together was to see how could we drive patient engagement around educational materials. So when the patient gets a diagnosis of cancer, they'll at some at that stage they will be given a pack of leaflets or information, and it's full of really great information, a lot of it written by the nurses that are treating the patients themselves, and or other sources of good information. And because generally people, when they get a diagnosis like that, kind of are in shock, it's a shocking thing, it's probably come out of the blue. So most people's experience is to kind of go, oh yeah, that's great, and put those bits of those leaflets to the side, and then you kind of, over the next period of 6 to 8 months of their treatment, they'll spend quite a bit of time just asking the nurses about the information that's contained in those leaflets or be on the phone. And really what we wanted to see was, can we kind of help to augment that kind of communication process between nurse, carer, and patient. So that was really where this work came out of. We ran some focus groups with patients there. We spoke to a lot of clinical nurse specialists in the London Clinic and in other NHS trusts in the UK. And we sort of got their input about what things would they like to see, what information would they like to receive through a platform like that. And we developed some early prototypes, and then that began the kind of process of innovation in that space.
Yeah. So a real journey, and obviously that sort of almost repurposing of that critical information and looking at that from those, as you say, those multimodal different methods of that communication at the start. Now,
Yeah.
I mentioned AI because
Yeah.
everybody's talking about AI, but I wanted to ask you about what you're doing at the company at eAltra, because you're using, I believe, conversational AI, and you're delivering these sort of remote patient assessments, if I'm right in saying
Yeah.
that. And you're doing these obviously around the cancer services that we've been touching on. But what inspired you for this specific application? And obviously, does it fill a gap then in the sort of global healthcare scenario and landscape that we see today?
Yeah, so what we were doing was really trying to emulate the interaction between a clinical nurse specialist and their patient. So that's really where the idea for taking a conversational approach comes from. And using a conversational platform or dialogue system, you can kind of do lots of interesting things around patients' ability or needs around the kind of way that they want to consume information. So people are, nearly everybody is familiar with messaging, going backwards and forwards and different versions of that, kind of like very basic SMSs or kind of more complex kind of chats. So that's really where the kind of idea of taking that approach came from. Now, it's like in healthcare, time is of the essence. It's that nobody has any time in healthcare, and time is very important in cancer care because catching cancer early or recurrence of cancer early has a really big impact on the outcomes for the patients. So what we're trying to facilitate with a platform like this is that we have a really good communication channel that's coming back between patients and the nurses, so that these kind of things can be delivered in that way. And we might have a platform that patients might be able to continuously inform their care team. In terms of the gap that exists in healthcare, it's the way that healthcare is moving. I mean, cancer treatment is getting better. People are surviving, and more people are surviving for longer after a diagnosis. So that means that quality of life and health-related quality of life are very important. Like, so, how you're treated, and then how the treatment affects you, and what that's going to be like for you over the rest of your life. So this is where information and engagement with symptoms really comes into play, and also creating opportunities for the patient to feed back to the clinical team, to tell them, let them know how their cancer is affecting them, how their treatment is affecting them. So that's where digital, I think, really comes in. And when taking kind of, sort of advanced kind of dialogue systems, you can really focus on making these platforms more engaging than the current things that we have in the market are.
Yeah, and talking about those more engagement sort of tools and platforms now compared to what we have, we're sort of touching on this important topic of digital transformation. And I know when it comes to transforming, particularly digital transformation in healthcare, it certainly isn't easy. Um, but what, from your perspective as somebody running this company and having, real world tools that are effective today, what does meaningful transformation actually look like when you start designing with patients at the center?
Well, I think, we have different levels of expectation around what digital means in different areas of our lives. And anybody who's gotten a budget airline flight recently will know how the kind of what did the role digital can play and the expectations that people have around digital. And this kind of model has sort of been touted as the way that healthcare should be kind of aspiring to kind of get this consumer model happening more in healthcare. But you know that's kind of maybe a management consultancy approach to take these things. Healthcare is a very personal interaction. It is about people. In my opinion, it's about increasing the opportunities for more human interactions in a system. And I think a lot of the focus that's been on digitalizing and particularly with the stuff that's going around LLMs and medical models and stuff like that, kind of replacing the doctor or that sort of type of role in the chain. And I think that that's missing the point. I think that really what we can, and it's hard to do that, it's difficult to do that. What we can do really is to be very, very focused with our digital interventions and augment just small pieces, support patients in their kind of information needs. So we equip them in a better way to interact with the healthcare system. And so that we, that we give them a good source of information that they can reference if they want to bring queries into their consultation with patient or with their consultants, with their clinicians, and they're not bouncing off around the internet and coming up with stuff that's not really going to help help their case. In terms of the bringing digital across the healthcare system, healthcare is incredibly fragmented, and we know all about data being siloed in different systems and all that sort of stuff, and the kind of technology that can be that's out there. Does it support the IT systems that are in place? It's pretty poor in most places. I mean, like there's exemplar hospitals and systems, but in a lot of kind of surprising places, it's pretty poor quality IT. So the kind of aspirational stuff that's being discussed around these new technologies is quite a distance off. But the great thing about healthcare, I would say, is that small interventions, because it's so big, can make massive differences. And, like with what we're doing with our trial sites in St. James's and Tala hospitals in Dublin, is we're focused on a very specific process around toxicity assessments in between chemotherapy cycles. And the way that that's just administered at the moment is quite inefficient. It's paper based, and it generally happens in the clinic rather than before patients come into clinic, and that causes quite lots of different problems about scheduling, about getting patients through their appointment successfully, getting them to their appointment successfully. And just by doing this small intervention, we can really make big impacts on the time that's involved in delivering these assessments, and also you know patients' experience.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think you said something a moment ago, which was, healthcare, you have that sort of budget airline consumer
Yeah,
approach to digital,
yeah,
but then, which we're all familiar with, but
yeah,
that thing that you said about healthcare, it's personal at the end of the day. And those small sort of meaningful interactions can have such a dramatic positive outcome. So it's really great to hear you talking about that area. And I wanted to ask you about the word about innovation, because I know you and the team, you're looking at innovation constantly, but you apply something called creative innovation. And that seems to be important when you're trying to bring something new or one of those small changes to the market. That must be important for patient sort of engagement and hospital engagement, is it?
yeah. Well, I mean, my sort of background in innovation and working in systems like this has, I think, benefited from taking this kind of approach to creative. I suppose what I mean by creative innovation is that we need to create space in these engagements for people to imagine what the future might look like, and quite often, because these way that these systems are structured, healthcare systems, I'm talking about, or hospitals, any large scale organizations, you know it can be difficult to create the space for people to feel confident to kind of come up with radical thinking about problems that they're trying to solve. So, I've always taken an approach of trying to create a sort of beginning space where people can come and talk about you know their craziest ideas, or whatever their biggest expansive ideas, and take it from there, rather than kind of starting out with like what's going to work in this space, because we're trying to change the system, we're trying to change the way these things are delivered, and we're trying to bring innovation, and innovation means changing these things. So we don't want to necessarily design for the way things are, but we want to design where the way things should be or are going to be.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I know you mentioned systems, and obviously you've got this sort of computing background. I think you also fine art, if I'm not mistaken, Dennis. But does that help then in terms of the way you're approaching healthcare technology today?
Yeah, I think I mean the fine my actual background is in music composition, so like that's another story, that's another podcast worth. But my kind of journey into healthcare began with a research project which was about using, I suppose, creative approaches to help with patients who were in isolation in hospitals, like patients who have leukemia or getting bone marrow transplanted, that kind of thing. So I began my sort of interaction in that capacity. Um, so for me, that was also that became about the kind of quality of the interaction with either the patient or the clinician that we were talking to. For me, that's what the whole kind of thing was about. The creative aspect was about, and that's kind of uh, followed me through sort of the innovative process, the innovation process. I think, you know, as I said, it's for me, it's about creating more time for human interaction in systems. And I think that, you need to kind of every now and then you need to reset the way things are working, or to at least take a little bit of time out and have a look.
Makes complete sense. Absolutely. Now, when I think about the international landscape of healthcare with life sciences, pharma, med tech, whatever, um, there are some very big universal challenges. Countries are very different, legislations are very different, regulations are very different. But when you look at it from your perspective, are there some universal challenges that you see are consistent when it comes to trying to better that patient experience? And maybe are there some big opportunities that you're looking to impact, Dennis?
Yeah, I think the big things are that there are more patients, well, particularly in the cancer space, there are more patients presenting. Cancer treatment is getting better, but that means people are showing up at different stages of their illness, and they're requiring more complex needs. So they're kind of coming back around through the system. And at the same time, we're kind of really understaffed in terms of the kind of meeting the demand of people that are coming through these systems, and the needs that they are coming in that need to be kind of met. I think that the opportunity in this space is that I like to look at it through a patient experience perspective. I think that um, the way that healthcare is developing is we are not going to go to hospitals in the same way that we go now in the future. That's not to, I think people will go for episodes of very acute care that can't be dealt with in other settings. So then a sort of fallout of that is that kind of more responsibility will come back on the patients to be engaged with their own healthcare. It'll be an expectation. People will need to manage themselves more going through these systems, and people are able to are great, and when you involve people in their care and equip them to be involved in their care, their outcomes are significantly better than if they're sort of passive people passing through these experiences. So there's lots of opportunity, and it's simple enough stuff. It's just providing the right information at the right time and getting the feedback from the patient at the right time, and that it's picked up in the system at the right time. So decisions are informed, and that's kind of not really happening in a successful way in many systems now. It's just these kind of frustrating mismatches of timing that are happening because people are working on legacy systems, or systems aren't speaking to each other. I'm talking about IT systems here, and so you kind of you're looking at it going, oh well, if this, and I'm sure any CTO or CIO of a hospital is laughing now at me saying this, because these are not easy things to fix. They're like, I know that I've worked in hospitals where we've done assessments on really exciting technology coming in the door, and you're kind of looking at it going, well, God, how will that happen? How will we get that to work in here? You can see the business value and the care value that it would bring to patients' lives, and you're just thinking, God, that it's just so far away from what we could support. So it's not easy to do these things. Like, lots of really smart people have spent a long time and a lot of money trying to make these things work. But I do think we are narrowing the gap between, I think it is each time we go around, it's getting better. I think it is getting the understanding about what's required to make these projects successful is getting better. And the kind of the needs are getting better. And we're working on a thing at the moment now. I'm working with a colleague on getting a new approach to kind of gathering nursing expertise into our systems, sort of on, in kind of deployed while they're deployed. And that's exciting because it's not, it's an opportunity for the system to be learning as it's working in delivering care.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I suppose it comes back to the artificial intelligence story that we were talking about earlier, that dealing with these opportunities and challenges, whether it's locally or internationally in healthcare, obviously AI plays a part in that going forward. But I wanted to ask you about there's this excitement, but there's also a lot of skepticism, and there's things like ethical implications. There's maintaining trust in AI-driven patient interactions. How are you approaching that, or what are your thoughts on that, Dennis?
Well, it's a I did a master's on machine ethics, like a cognitive computing, and my thesis was on about machine ethics, which was ethical reasoning in machines and capabilities. So I'm kind of, and I did some subsequent research work about attitudes to care robots in care of the elderly settings. So I'm kind of familiar with that space and the kind of ethical challenges around that. I think that the big thing at the moment to be wary of is the hype that's going on around AI and large language models, and kind of um, sort of an over expectation of what these systems, what they are, and what they're capable of delivering and what they're not capable of delivering. And so I think that it's there's a lot of kind of noise in the space. So we have to be kind of careful about what we put out there, and what's achievable. But I'd go back to my point, or what I said about small interventions that AI can actually do well, things that it can do well, really enhance experience, or can really enhance experience for everybody, but for patients. And if we just stay focused on the stuff that we can do, and then that enables a kind of a better plugging in of the patient to the human care. And what I mean by that is that if we have like what we're trying to achieve with eAltra is that, like, when you go in to see your consultant, or you go and see your clinical nurse specialist, that we have provided you with the relevant information that the clinical team can act on. And this is the important bit of health information. I think it's like, can the care team do something about it? Is it related to your cancer? And can the care team do something about it? And these times that are available to patients are short in the consultation. It depends on where you are in the world, but 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, half an hour if you can afford it, or whatever, it's like, or whatever. But the time, so a kind of an experience of from a clinical point of view is like the clinician trying to understand what it is the patient wants to talk about, or that's troubling them, what's affecting them about their cancer, what it is that they really want to discuss. And that can take up a fair chunk of a consultation, and then the remaining time is about trying to do something about it and trying to help with that. So what we're trying to do is to reduce the time to question part, I suppose, or time to discussion part, because the patient can run some of their thinking through our system. Or there's a thing called a patient concerns inventory, which we're working with a group in Dublin, in St. James's, in a surgical follow-up clinic, but also a group it's from the Liverpool Head and Neck Cancer Centre, and it's quite a good tool because it's kind of a patient prompt, and it's really it's about it's in its current form. It's a kind of a checklist that the patient can tick off and then bring it into the consultation and say, oh yeah, I want to talk about these things. But so we're kind of trying to obviously we're digitizing it, we're bringing a little bit of more interaction into the thing, and bringing that into these groups. So then when the patient comes in, they say, well, actually, I do want to talk about these topics. it's not that I can't remember, or I'm too embarrassed, or all the range of issues that might prevent a good exchange between patient and clinician.
Yeah, I like that. And look, obviously things seem to be going well because I must mention to people watching and listening to this episode around the world that you also won the Best Emerging AI category at the recent Spark crowdfunding Top 100, which is a major achievement. So you must be getting some good response around that too from both patients and the healthcare community, right?
Yeah, that was great. That was a really, we were really chuffed to get that, and it was great to see the response that we got to getting that award. It's always nice to be celebrated when you're a startup. Do you know what I mean? It's like you'll take, it's tough enough. So it's great that they get that kind of clap on the back or whatever. But yeah, so we've spun out of Trinity last year, or out of the Adapt Center, and we became a campus company of Trinity towards the end of last year, and we closed some investment from Enterprise Ireland, HPSU funding. So that's all been great to get that kind of endorsement and get that backing from all those and all those people that all the people within those groups that I've just mentioned have been really, really supportive of us getting into the market. It's healthcare is tough. It's long. It can take a long time for people to adopt to new practices, and you're kind of running a sort of, you're running research as part of your kind of, validation. It's a long road, but I think that it's people's response has been very, very positive to what we're doing. And I have my team and my advisors to thank a lot for that. So because, if you're getting the kind of question, if you're getting the difficult stuff right, then the kind of the conversation becomes easier. So yeah, so we've got good people around us, and that's been great.
Yeah, and I mean, the trio of being recognized for the best emerging AI, having Enterprise Ireland in as part of the story, and also, being recognized as a high potential company that's doing something not just innovative, but that could really scale internationally, I think is really important, and certainly something people should keep track of with the great work you're doing. I want to also, before we run out of time, I just want to cover a couple of other important topics, and it's a bit about you've mentioned in the past about pushing the envelope of patient engagement, but in practical terms, what does that look like, and how are you measuring the success, Dennis?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to my early engagement in with healthcare. Uh, at the beginning there, and that kind of the beginning of research there. It's always been a focus for me to sort of try to keep putting the patient front and center into whatever transaction that is going on in the healthcare setting. And you know systems, so in my experience of healthcare, and I'm sure lots of people will tell me I'm wrong, but healthcare is full of great people, you know, people who work in hospitals or care for other people are brilliant people. In my experience, the ones I've met, it's an amazing thing to do. I think I've seen some incredible stuff in watching other people deliver care um to patients. I think when you scale that to the level that you have to do in a healthcare system or delivery, then systems thinking comes into play, and it can be harder and harder for people to express that kind of human care delivery, or that aspect, um or to retain that into, and people do, right? I'm not saying they do, but the more that gets squeezed, the less time there is for that stuff. I think for me, if you continue to focus through the lens of patient experience and how the patient is experiencing this thing, then it's a constant refocusing back through. And people are really really work really hard in healthcare, like really hard. And you know, we all know about COVID and the burnout and the kind of, and people haven't had a chance to really recover from that in terms of delivering care. So it's like it's a tough job, you know, which like I don't do that aspect of things. So my hat goes off completely to the people who do. So I think, but I also think that kind of to refocus, to keep continuously focused through patient experience, kind of brings up some kind of continues to throw up interesting questions about how we should deal with the way that we create care systems of care.
And that continual focus on those questions that come up, do you find yourself as the founder and somebody sort of driving this strategy forward? Do you find you constantly having to balance things like both the technology that you're trying to do, also the ambition of the company, and then you've got the privacy and those clinical constraints? Are you constantly having to watch that from a balance perspective
Yeah,
when you're
no,
looking to scale
absolutely.
the company?
Yeah, it's not it's there's a lot of moving parts in terms of all of those things from a regulatory point of view and privacy protection point of view. But um, I think if you push into them, I as a founder have if you push into the spaces and kind of try to educate yourself as well as you can, or find the people who know the smarter people than you and who know more about it, then you can cope with it. And I think that like regulation, well, I mean, there's different attitudes to around different territories, but I think it is a good thing to have regulated because these are kind of they're very, you know, they're potentially hazardous spaces, really. So they need to be, and you know, they need to be looked after properly. And so I don't have any problem with that. I think that you know, and you can innovate within that. But actually, that does bring an interesting point because the kind of where we're a digital health company, and where tech kind of thinking meets healthcare thinking has often really come, you know, run afoul of each other in the past, because you can't go into a healthcare system with a sort of move fast and break things attitude, to quote one sort of maxim. But you know, it's not how it works. Like that's not going that's you know, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's, you know, that's the opposite in healthcare. You know, it's like it's move slow and fix things. Well, I mean, I think that, you know, be considered and try to fix problems. But it is a balancing act. And you know, the tension, or what can be quite challenging, is that the timelines for sort of validation in healthcare, you know, can be quite long. And in the life of time is everything for a startup, you know, it's like you know, so finding that balance between it is challenging, you know, because like you do want to move fast in the development of your company, but you want to be validated and safe. That's the most important thing. And that is that's what counts in healthcare, you know, like is who's using this and is it safe to use with patients. And you've got to demonstrate that as a company.
Smart advice, yeah, wise words. Thank you, Dennis, for shedding some light on that, because I know there's a balance to be struck there, um, and also that sort of interaction where technology meets healthcare. I think you've captured that beautifully. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is I know you spent some time as a commercial lead with the Adapt Center, and you mentioned the Adapt Center earlier, and also being spun out of Trinity Adapt Center. So,
Mm,
you know, when you're working with that sort of, if I phrase it as like an academic partnership,
mm.
um, that's obviously enhanced? Does it help you accelerate the work that you're doing with eAltra?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a huge depth of expertise in Trinity College and in the Adapt Center. And they for I spun into the university, so I came from industry in, and you know, it is a different, you know, there's that presents its own challenges. You know, there's kind of the pace. You know, those are kind of, you know, business is about kind of like trying to achieve as much as quickly as possible with spending as little amount of money to do that, and kind of the kind of way that grant systems are set up in academia is kind of can be in opposition to that. Do you know what I mean? It's about kind of periods of time that are set aside for research, and that's the way it should be. So these kind of technology kind of accelerators, or these kind of programs about, you know, innovation and getting research out. It's you know, there are challenges for sure, you know, but saying that, you have the confidence as a business, as a founder or an entrepreneur, you have the confidence of knowing that the IP that's being generated, or the intellectual property, or the kind of innovation that's going on is of a really high standard, and you are being backed by the university in that capacity. So that you know, brings a good bit of confidence to the table. So you know, there are great people in Adapt and great people in Trinity, and my experience of working with them has been really, really positive.
Oh, that makes sense. And I want to ask you, obviously, there's an awful lot of concerns within healthcare, rightly so, and regulation that we touched on. Do you think there's some big concerns that the healthcare industry still needs to grapple with? And also, Dennis, what's exciting you as the founder about maybe some of the future of healthcare technology?
So the concerns are that I think that we have to be quite careful about the hype that's around AI and the potential of large language models, and the expectations of that. I think any, you know, people, you know, you don't from a using generative AI, or that kind of thing, you know, you can't really be dealing with a system that's kind of, you know, hallucinating or making up stuff, you know, and you don't need to do that, in my opinion, in to deliver a successful interaction. You can use that somewhere in the chain to kind of make the kind of process of interfacing with the technology more kind of fluid and natural, but you want the answers to be the right answers every time you go to look for the answers. So that's an area of concern. I think that you know, going back to the point about tech coming into, you know, into healthcare, and a kind of, you know, a tech first sort of approach to the very human things that are at the center of care delivery. You know, I think people who are coming in to innovate in that space should try and spend as much time as possible listening to the people they are trying to make platforms for, you know, and or with or whatever. So I think that that would be kind of concerns. I think the potential for this is that we have pervasive digital uh, uh, platforms that are getting better and better and better at what they are, what they can do, and they kind of think that the idea of um I mean, this idea of a sort of a concierge type thing, or an agent that would accompany, it's not a new idea in healthcare, you know, like that you would have an assistant that would be able to bring you to, but I think that aspects of that are getting closer. And I think that's a really interesting thing. For me, I think health literacy and health information is so important, and people feeling that they're not excluded from their own healthcare experience because of, you know, their background or their level of education, or whatever. So that's the exciting thing for me. I think that if we can really achieve what we're trying to achieve with things like eAltra, where we are, you know, the patient is getting the information that they need when they need it, and in the way that they need it, and that really excites me. I mean, that's probably conceited to say my product excites me, but it's like we are passionate about what we're doing. I think that you know, for at me, any technology that plugs the patient's experience keeps plugging it back into their healthcare interaction is a positive thing. It is an exciting thing. I think technically and in terms of what's or kind of like from a scientific point of view, from a science point of view, the kind of progress that's being made about treatment delivery and what's capable now is really breathtaking. But we do need to tackle our systemic delivery of care. Those issues aren't going. There's a lot of people on the planet, and there's more every day. And we're getting better at treating illness. So we need to be able to help patients to be more part of that, just not passive in their healthcare.
So, Dennis, the other thing that springs to mind is we were talking earlier about the amount of patients presenting themselves more and more, even though treatments are getting better and better and technology is getting better and better. But obviously, as more and more people present, and depending on where in the world you're presenting these sort of patient care experiences, things like language and culture come into it, because a lot of the topics may be, for example, in English, whereas that may not be the first language to people presenting in various cultures and countries around the world and different geographic locations. How are you thinking about that at eAltra?
Yeah, well, look, that's a really really salient point, about kind of meeting people where they need to be met in terms of their information needs. So it's like if that needs to be in a different language, then that's absolutely essential. We've just recently been approached about doing an Arabic translation of some of the content that we're doing. So that's something that we're engaging with and trying to see how we would do that in a successful way. But yeah, it's really important. But even if you go to areas in London or in England or the UK or whatever, the kind of diversity of languages that even NHS trusts now have to deal with in terms of the kind of language they have to get their patient leaflets printed in and all this kind of getting translators at meetings. I think that it's obviously a massive kind of issue, or not issue but challenge, and it's a positive thing, but it's if you're going to be serious about kind of what's the, increasing access through technology, and you have to be serious about these kind of initiatives. But yeah, it's definitely on our roadmap for sure.
I suppose the more countries, different geographical areas, the more languages that you have to deploy at eAltra, so that important information reaches the right customer at the right time. Back to that,
Yeah.
it's often critical, the timing, particularly in the area that you're working in. So thank you for sharing all that, Dennis. Finally, for any innovators who are watching or listening to us, and if they want to make a difference in patient care, have you got a piece of advice or some parting thoughts you can leave us with for people looking to maybe develop technology with this empathy at its core?
I think that you can. I think the road to innovation and starting up a company, it's long, and it's even if you're great, brilliant, and you've done it before or whatever your experience, it's still long. And it's a series of choices, that you're trying to make, and you're trying to be as make the choice to the best capacity, or in the best capacity that you can at each stage. So I think for what you can do is you can really go out and talk to the people. If you've got a business idea, or if you've got an idea about an innovation, spend as much time as you can talking to the people that are going to use it, or B, are going to pay for it. You know, see, try and get all that covered off, and you can do that kind of for nothing. It's your own time. You can go and we did a lot of that. Over time, we did a lot of that. We spoke to our users. We got them in to give us feedback at every stage of what we're doing. Um, but and then go and build something, because then when you're building something, then you could kind of, you're starting in the right place. If you build too early, then you're sort of you will definitely be dealing with problems, and you just want to know whether these are actual problems or just problems because you didn't get your act together first. You didn't get the brief into shape. So I would urge people who are thinking about innovating to get, there's lots of kind of tools out there that you can follow, and you can kind of really refine your proposition before you get into the messy business of actually trying to make it real. And yeah, and then you're bringing people on a journey with you, So, but I think it, I like it. This is my second time around doing this kind of thing, so I don't know. I like it. It's, you get to talk to people a lot, and so yeah. I mean, I would recommend it overall. I would recommend it.
Oh, it's great advice. And thank you so much, Dennis, for spending some time with us. Yeah, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of today's episode with Denis Roche. And I want to ask people to make sure that they tune in again to the next episode of VistaTalks, where you can watch or listen to some more interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world, just like Denis and the great work he's doing at eAltra. Go and check it out. Certainly a company to watch, doing some fantastic things, not just in AI and technology, but in actually, providing empathy and technology and making a real difference for patients. So thank you, Denis. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Great, thanks, Simon.